A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Well, actually, it's a few days ago, and it's in this galaxy. Hey everybody, Chris here. Well, some of you may or may not be aware, but I have moved. And as part of the fun times of that move, I had zero internet during the time that we initially planned to record a session. So, without any new content on the horizon, a few of the members decided to get together and talk Star Wars. So, I have no idea what they talked about or what they said. I'll be learning that as we go as well. But I'm excited to hear what they have to say, and we wanted to put some new content out there for those of y'all that love listening to this podcast. So, listen, check it out, hear what they have to say.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of For Light and Dice. I am very clearly not Chris. He is sadly not here, and neither is Robin, but we are going to go forward and forge ahead for another fun episode with what is here with the rest of the cast. I don't know what the fuck that sentence was. And welcome back. Before we get into what we are doing today, I would like to introduce the cast members that are here, and I'm going to start with somebody who never gets to go first because Chris is always here, and this person knows who they are. So tell me your name, your character, and your pronouns, my dear.
Hi, I'm Charles. My pronouns are he, him, and I play Win the Duros pilot, whose pronouns are he, they.
Jess, would you like to go next?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm Jess. My pronouns are they, them. And I play Lysander, the human, and he... That made it sound like he's fucking from Adventure Time.
I always think of Adventure Time every time you say Lysander the human.
I don't know why I just connected those dots right But yeah,
I never brought it up before, but I always thought that.
His pronouns are he, him. There we go.
Colton?
Hello. I'm Colton. I play Coriel. It's wonderful that I can say that now and not, dance around the issue like I have to occasionally. And we both go by any and all. So, yeah. Hi.
And I'm Hope. My pronouns are she, her. I play Gaz, the Gaza Rishi, she's not a fucking Rishi, the Gazo operative, whose pronouns are also she, her, and I'm also your host for today. So we had some schedule things happen, but we also didn't have any more episodes, and we love y'all, and we wanted to give you something. So, we couldn't make our schedules come together, but thanks to daily life and other things we have to weather, we had no more recorded episodes. Oh no. And we really wanted something to upload, so here we go. It's Random FLAD. It's Random FLAD. We needed something. Here you go. It's Random FLAD. Don't be sad. Have Random FLAD. And now this will stop because this is horribly bad. Yay.
This may have been a mistake to do this episode first thing in the morning before I've consumed an entire cup of coffee. I feel
you
like
guys gave you
one minimum
you guys
cup
gave way
of coffee.
too much power.
Oh, Lord.
I'm on
No, so what
cups.
essentially that we're going to do here today, everybody, we got some awesome questions from our Discord community. If you want to come join us in Discord, go to our Twitter or X or whatever that Elon calls it now, and you can find us there. It's free to join. And we took some questions, we wrote some questions, and we're just going to have a little bit of a behind-the-scenes episode, and we're also going to play a game later. And my co-podcasters do not know much about the game, and I'm excited, so... but the first thing I wanted to do was talk about the last session, because that last session was a doozy. And from everything from the great hyperspace disaster happening essentially in real time for us to saving Lysatra, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit and just kind of decompress. So what was... I want to start with you, Jess, because that was a really big Lysander episode. So, what were some of your thoughts on the last couple sessions?
Well, definitely that I myself just took critical emotional damage while we recorded those. um, especially last session, as I hope most of you have heard by now. Whenever
We should say
Spoilers!
there are spoilers.
Spoilers
Yeah,
for the
spoiler
last
alert.
session.
Sorry, I'm staring at Charles's cat.
Yeah.
Jonathan Harker is visiting us, and he's amazing.
Jonathan Harker has spent our entire pre-discussion lounging quietly on the bed, and so I was like, okay, I'll let him in. You know, I'll let him hang out while we record. Literally the second we hit the record button, he was up and screaming. Now
He's like,
he's
"It's
sitting
my
in my
time."
lap. He said, "It's my time. I have some opinions about Lysatra that I want to share with the class."
Chris, I love pets in my podcast, and I'm hosting this episode, so please leave in some cute meows for me, please, and thank you. Continue.
Quick note from the editor. I am going to leave some meows in, but please understand that a abundance of meowing, and a lot of meowing at that, is a bit much for most podcast listeners. FYI for the listener, Jonathan Harker is the cat of Charles, and that is Charles's fault. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say. But that's it. Continue with the show.
Okay. I need to not look at Charles because I'm like cat.
There's so much cat.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, besides me taking critical emotional damage, Lysander also took a lot of critical emotional damage, psychological damage, because as y'all know, spoilers for FLAD season 2, Coriel realized first that there was people on the thing that had launched out of hyperspace, and then Lysander realized next, and then just let Win shoot at it, even though he fully was like, I know there's people on there, and then also told Gauze to shoot at it too before Gauze realized there was people on it. So there's that going on. Oh, I am like conflicted about where I'm going with Lysander because much like him, I'm just like, what am I doing?
I think leaving home might have been a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably, if Lysander didn't leave home, I don't think Lysander would have a home anymore.
Lysander wouldn't even, Lysander might not even be alive anymore if he had left home, I guess.
Listen, to be fair, the sacrifice of all those people ensured that Thranto can happen in hundreds of
So
years.
true.
It was
So
a worthy sacrifice.
thank you,
So, you're
Squonk
welcome.
Crew. Thank you, Squonk Crew. We saved Thranto.
We saved Just Twitter.
We sa-
You're welcome, Just Twitter.
I think from the last session, like with Lysander, like one of the most interesting things to me is watching this kind of like pseudo master apprentice sort of relationship developing between Lysander and Coriel. At least, like, we're not saying like they're Padawan or anything, but there's at least like it's cool having somebody else with the Force on there. And Colton, the way you just like dropped that fucking monologue
that
was amazing.
the fact that was all improv was just like,
Again, it wasn't improv. It was a pre-built scaffolding that allowed me to
Take the compliment,
Okay,
asshole.
God, thanks.
I remember
I'm very
'cause-
good at this, I guess.
I remember because famously, I mentioned in the Discord when the episode aired, and then I'll mention here too for posterity, I was not at my computer when that monologue happened. I had gotten up to deal with something IRL. And Colton's monologue starts, and I'm listening, because I listen along with everybody else. I'm listening, and I'm like, did Kevin Scott write this? Like, This is so. This feels like something that should be in the High Republic. Like, this is some George Mann shit for real. Like, what the fuck is this? What
Didn't
is
one
happening?
of our listeners quote retweet the episode tweet, and it was just like, this is
my
my
favorite-
Yup.
like
Yeah, I
High
think it was
Republic
Callan,
story.
actually.
Yeah.
Shout out to
Callan.
that person, because that tweet improved my mood for probably 6 solid hours.
It's interesting for me too, because I did go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes, and how much Lysander has changed from like being like, wow, Jedi, I'm going on an adventure, to now being like, I am so jaded and tired of this.
I mean, like 27 murders within like the span of a week will kind of do that to a person.
It was not a span of a week,
Depends on
but
the
yeah.
person.
And it's definitely more than 27 at this point.
I mean, it depends on the person. Marcion Rowe would be like, man, I'm off this week, aren't you?
No, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
If Lorna D isn't personally doing 27 murders, I'm pretty sure that she just can't function as a person.
It's like her cup of calf in the morning. Just like,
Yep.
just
It's
murdering
like, hold on,
someone.
don't talk to me. I have to kill someone first.
I think one interesting thing for me looking at the arc of Lysander and just what he has experienced over the course of a season and a half so far is almost kind of this notion of the legend or the story or sort of the aspirational like fantasy element of Star Wars, which Lysander really seemed to have at the beginning. That was sort of the mentality that he seemed to leave with, to now where he's kind of had to become an adult in Star Wars.
He has gone through the Luke Skywalker treatment between the original trilogy and the sequels, except within the span of like a month or two, whereas Luke had like years to become like that angry
Lysander has
hermit.
discovered that. Lysander has found out what Andor is actually about.
Yeah.
Lysander thought he was going to be living through an episode of he thought he was going to be living through like Star Wars: A New Hope, and then
Young
realized
Jedi Adventures.
Young
Young
Jedi
Jedi
Adventures,
Adventures, yeah.
and realized he's in Andor. He's in season 5 of the Clone Wars. And he's like, oh
When
oh
will
dear.
Lysander beat up a bad guy with a brick?
I'm waiting. I can't wait to watch that.
I fully expect that will happen at some point. Gaz will just be in the background like, yes!
Yes, get
Riot!
So one thing that I actually wrote about in Gaz's journal, if you want to see more of stuff like that, join our Discord, that I haven't actually published yet, was I don't understand how Wynn is not breaking. Because just in a very short amount of time, Wynn has essentially did everything on Naboo, made sure we all got home, we lost a friend, and has taken on this really heavy burden that nobody else even knows the full context around. And I think my favorite moment was hearing what really was the first time in my recollection, Wynn breaking a little bit in the cockpit while talking to Gaz. And that moment was really strong for me. And I felt like I was seeing a side of Wynn for the first time. So like Charles, how is Wynn doing right now?
Not great. We talk a lot about Gaz sort of being the emotional mom friend of the group and somebody who very much whenever somebody's having an emotional moment, that Gaz is going to put her own feelings aside and her focus is going to be on whoever needs that. And Wynn, to an extent, has a less emotional version of that. That looking at, Wynn's backstory and the way Wynn acts, they're very concerned with, looking out for the crew. And they feel very protective of crews that they're on. That was their whole thing with Irvin. is that they had felt that Irvin was putting their crew in danger, and so Wynn mutinied against Irvin, and like there was stuff. It was in a short story. It hasn't come out yet, but looking at when they're the type of person, they talk about how they feel like they're running down this road. This is the moment that Hope is talking about. And they feel like if they stop and have this moment to kind of process for themselves, that they'll fall off, that it'll just overwhelm them. And so when kind of toxically, like, this is not a good mentality, this is something that they have to work on, when feels like they need to keep moving. So somebody has to take the ship down. Somebody has to make sure that they're, breathing. Somebody has to, keep everybody moving forward. And when feels like it's them, that they have to do this. It's something that it has its positives in sort of keeping the game moving forward. But it's also something Wynn is eventually going to have to reconcile with. That they can't just keep, Control-C, Control-Ving all of their traumatic experiences into this little folder on their desktop labeled "to be dealt with later." That this is something they're eventually going to have to deal with. And them opening up to Gauze, not in a dismissive way, but saying very honestly what they're feeling, that was a big moment for me for the character after a season and a half of this character thus far being incredibly focused on keeping things moving forward. And the other thing with Wynn as a character, you may have noticed emotions make Wynn uncomfortable. Like, strong feelings of emotion. Wynn is not an unemotional person. Wynn is not a person who doesn't feel emotion, nor do they not understand emotion. They get it. It just makes them uncomfortable to see and to have to interact with. That's another thing that they're starting to have to reconcile with. So I guess the short answer to the question is they feel like they can't break. They feel like they can't stop right now. They might later. And they're also such an intensely internal person that it's difficult for them to open up and say, I am feeling upset. The other thing too to keep in mind with Wynn is that Wynn is the sort of character, you have to eternally remember that this character is a good person, but they're not necessarily a moral person. They're not necessarily the sort of person who isn't going to fire on this pod knowing there's people in it once they've already done this. They kind of agreed with Coriel. Once they had fired and once they had learned, then they were like, oh, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. We make a split-second choice and save these people. And Wynn is the type of person who's going to be the one to push that button, be the one to make that choice. So there was a lot going on with Wynn internally in the last episode. I also think the decision, and this is something I plan to explain very, very quickly in the next session, once we get a chance to, why Wynn made the decision to delete the data. That Wynn, spoilers for FLAD, Wynn reached over and actually deleted the technical readout. So Wynn is now the only person who knows how many people were killed on board the pod. And so Wynn explaining why they did that, and also what that data told them that wasn't necessarily on there, because I also went back and listened to, there was some interesting timeline stuff that happened in that scene. But that's going to be something that'll come up. I think about Wynn a lot.
Listen,
I have
think
a
about
lot
God
of
daily.
thoughts about Wynn, just as a character. They're very interesting to me.
I also agree. I think about Gauze on the daily. It's fine. But I just want to just say that moment meant a lot to Gauze, because as someone who has a lot of trust issues, that moment of honesty like she already like trusted like Win like with her life. Like she was like, yeah, Win's not gonna let me die or anything. But like it kind of hit a different level of she felt like it was just a different level of trust for her. It was a different kind of moment that it just meant a lot to Gaz. I don't really know how to put it into words. Um, One thing I do want to ask you, Colton, is you've now
Yes.
had a little time with Coriel.
Yes.
You've been 2 full sessions and a little bit of end of season 1. So, like, how is the experience of having to bring a new character into the Squonk going for you?
I think it's going really well. It also helps that I think about Coriel literally 24/7. Uh,
Oh my god, same!
Raise your hand if you are not constantly thinking about your character on Verlaine Dice.
Or not? Oh,
Not constantly thinking.
Oh. No one.
Let
No
the
one
record
raised their
show.
hand.
No one.
This is
yeah,
an
let the
audio medium, Charles.
let the record show that no one raised their hand.
I have only one TTRPG character I think about more than Win, and that's a character who I've been playing for half a decade.
Yeah, I have a character
That's
who I think
valid.
about more than Lysander, and it was my first TTRPG character.
Sorry, Colton. Please continue answering the question.
Yeah, no worries. So I think the experience is really well. I think Coriel is meshing very well with the group. Sort of has like individual like connections to, or like is, I mean, they're new because Coriel has known these people for 5 days. Um, but Coriel I think fits in a good spot because um they have like a distinctly sort of like similarity with all the crew, which I'm liking, and they're fun. I didn't have the idea that they use tarot or their sabak deck as tarot until the hyperspace disaster. Like when that happened, I was just like, how would Coriel commune with the Force? Well, his cards, which was fun. Um, but yeah, I think it's going well. I also am just saying that any mannerisms that are shared between one and Coriel is canon because I can say things like that. And it's not just a personal quirk of me. Hee hee hoo hoo ha 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 ha.
One thing that's interesting to me about Coriel, and I wanted to ask you about this, Colton, because
Yeah.
it came up in the last session. It was kind of a big fucking pivotal moment. Came down to this. What's interesting to me about Coriel is that one of the general themes of the Squonk crew, across all of the characters, every single one of them, is the balance between light and dark, and that it's not a binary balance. It's not one
Yeah.
single line with light side at one end of it and dark side at the other end of it. Bite my ass, Knights of the Old Republic. One of my favorite games of all time, but I hate the morality system in that game.
It's garbage.
It's not that. That's not what the Force is, and that's not what people are. And Coriel has a very specific moral compass that he has that is not the simple binary light and dark. Can you elaborate a little bit on playing a character who doesn't have such I hate to say simplistic morality, but a easy to understand morality, and how that is affected, particularly the last session?
Yeah. So, I was sort of basing a lot of his, morality beliefs on just kind of pure utilitarianism, right? He's almost always going to make the choice that has the hypothetical best consequences for the most amount of people, right? Which is not a Jedi thing, right? Like that is the Jedi are not utilitarians. They are specifically, each individual case, not like the grand thing. but I didn't want to make Coriel a bad person, right? Like, he could have easily in his first scene, he could have easily killed the two gamblers that he was gambling against, but he decided to diffuse the situation by lying, because he's a liar. um which also is a really interesting part of this, because every time that Coriel is saying to Lysander, hey, this isn't your fault, to him that's a lie.
Really?
Yeah, Coriel, like, when he figured out sort of what's happening, he's like, "Who these people are sort of the cause of all this."
Oh, that's so fascinating.
But at the same time, it does not help anyone for him to say that. So of course he's not going to say that out loud, and it's not like with him, he doesn't think that y'all did this on purpose, right? You didn't know that the Great Hyperspace Disaster was going to...
We didn't know the squonk was going to cross us.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think if, like, Coriel would have a very different opinion of y'all if you, like, one, actually gave Marcion the flight plans instead of just the squonk doing it on your behalf. But yeah, like, the Coriel is kind of wary of y'all, but also trying to forge a more cohesive group throughout.
What's funny? It's also, I haven't added this to Lysander's journals. I still have not published. I'm sorry, I'm shy. But Lysander is actually also does not trust Coriel at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I like that.
Intrigue.
There's a lot of fun emotional dynamics on the Squonk, and I think it speaks. This is such an interesting thing with looking at TTRPGs, because I tend to find there's a couple of different types of TTRPG players, and some, there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with being a min-maxer. There's nothing wrong with building your character around wanting to win encounters. However, I do find that, there's people like that who see it as a game, who see it as, this is a game that we're trying to use numbers to win. And I don't think the FLAD group falls into that category. I think they more fall into the category of, there are a bunch of characters having a lot of emotions. Let's spend a lot of time dealing with those emotions. And I think that makes for an interesting type of show, and also is very in line with sort of Star Wars storytelling. And I think this is something that Chris understands as a DM really, really well, because Chris understands Star Wars really, really well, and what makes the heart of Star Wars. And what makes the heart of Star Wars, Shitty Men on Twitter, is not beating lightsabers together. It's characters going on these journeys and exploring these complex ideas and these complex relationships, and really a reflection of our reality and how to deal with some of these ideas. So that's something I've been really enjoying watching the dynamic between Coriel and Lysander, in part because it's such an interesting, there's so many interesting layers to it, and it really comes down to how the players are choosing to play these characters, and the amount of thought and love and care that's being put into why are these characters the way they are and how are they reacting. And it's something that's very rewarding for me as a player and as an audience member for some of these scenes, to sit there and be like, oh, this is the good shit. This is good shit.
Oh, not to, like, contradict you a little bit, Charles, but I will just say, One and Coriel were min-maxed to hell.
What does that mean?
So in D&D and other TTRPGs, oftentimes, you can, put stats and other things very low at the min to get other stats that are more important to your character at the max. So that way you're, like, very optimized for combat, specifically. And I just do that because I like when my numbers go up and I have big numbers.
Well, I can tell it worked really well for 1N.
Wow!
Like actually, oh god damn it. Oh, okay, I'm back. Hi. Glitched.
Just gonna drink my coffee
But
and
like,
wait for Hope to finish
Oh,
fucking
Jesus
dying.
Christ! I'm sorry, Colton.
no, you're fine. But the reason Coriel is a Quirmian is because of stats. Like, there's no like lore reason. I mean, I love
thought
Quirmians.
you just like Yariel.
Yeah,
I do.
thought
I
it was just
genuinely
about
do.
Yariel.
It was wonderful that those two things coincided. But yeah, no, I chose Quirmian because I'm just like, I want these stats to look like this, and Quirmian is what gets those stats to look like that. Because of how Star Wars 5e works. But I think I've broken out of the mold of a min-max player. It also doesn't help that I play like Warhammer and stuff, which just like focuses my mind on getting good numbers.
So, I just want to say that Colton and Jess, you two absolutely blew my mind because at the very start of this conversation, I was like, "Wow, I love their Master Padawan like relationship."
Yeah, and then it turns out they both are like, don't trust no one. Not even yourself.
Well,
I
y'all
mean-
tricked me, so congrats. You.
The main
You
reason
what?
Coriel has been like giving advice and stuff is so that Lysander doesn't go full like murder dark-sidey.
Well,
my God!
here's the thing. Here's the controversial statement. Just because they have this underlying dynamic of not really trusting each other, and this being, dare I say, a more utilitarian relationship, doesn't necessarily contradict that it is a Master Padawan relationship.
That's true.
Because, again, going back to one of the big themes in For Light and Dice being not everything is a strict binary, things can be more complicated and more interesting than that. The relationship between Coriel and Lysander, throughout the first season, Lysander had multiple, like, people trying to teach him, and it just wasn't working. Because they were people that were trying to teach him, first in a more traditional sense, and then, again, with Orla Jareni, who, while being my absolute favorite Jedi in the High Republic, is still a Jedi, and still has that mentality to a certain extent. Someone like Coriel coming in and going like, oh no, I can relate to you on a different level, and the different level is being a shitty gremlin, then that's something that Lysander seemed to kind of need. And it's just, there's a teacher-student relationship going on here. It's not a healthy one, but it's there.
They're both going, it's their relationship maps, both of them are the meme where it's like, you can make him better, I can make him worse.
Yeah, yeah, the not everything is like the binary type of thing with FLAD. Yeah, it's definitely something Lysander has slowly realized.
Including
yeah, in the
over half
beginning,
of the characters.
yeah, that's yeah. But no, because yeah, in the beginning he definitely was like viewing things as like, oh, black and white. There's the light side of the force and there's the dark side of the force. You're good or you are bad. And now he's just like, what the fuck is happening? He's like, he's like, I don't. Things aren't necessarily good, not necessarily bad, but I'm making choices that are making me really distraught because part of him is still wanting to be like, no, it is black and white. It is one thing or the other, which, yeah, probably by the end of the season, I don't know, anything could happen. He'll definitely realize, like, no, it isn't just one way or the other.
I think, speaking to the fantastical element of Star Wars, I think that there is a degree of fantasy in the notion that things are either good or evil, and that is part of the fun of the original trilogy, and to an extent, most Star Wars media. It's also fun when Star Wars doesn't do this, but some of the fun of some Star Wars media is there is a good guy and there is a bad guy, and we know who the good guy is and we know who the bad guy is, and the good guys make good choices and the bad guys do evil. But then there's times to say, interacting in a society isn't like that. When you have this broader, even in an era like the High Republic, right? The High Republic is such an era of hope and such an era of glitzy, Gilded Age, on the surface prosperity. And even then, we see as early on as Into the Dark, we see that it's not necessarily trickled down, because trickle down economics doesn't exist, and Ronald Reagan was a trash garbage shit person.
Correct.
But that's part of the thing of not being in this position of privilege like the Jedi, to where you can make choices and say, well, I am a good person who is making good choices. When you're down in the muck with everybody else trying to survive, you have to do things like Affie Hollow does, or Ty Yorick does. And some of these character names mean things to Colton, but others don't. So when you have a character like one of my personal favorite characters from the High Republic, Leox Gyasi and also Geode, who pretty consistently make morally upright calls, like, they're both pretty good people. When you have those people, it shines all the more for the story, because down at the level where they are, just basically working as space truckers, it's a little more complicated than the Jedi. And I think that's something fun to explore with Lysander, and then also with Wynn and Gaz as a counterpoint to that. Because Wynn and Gaz are both people who are very jaded people in their own specific way, because both of them have endured some sort, we don't quite 100% know, both of them have endured some sort of mistreatment at the hands of a system. And it has colored their view when it comes to morality. And I will pause to say, this is a tabletop games where we roll dice to shoot our pew-pew blasters at people. But I think throughout the first season, I honestly think one of my favorite arcs for the first season was when Lysander and Wynn were on Naboo. And they kind of had a clash of values going, where Wynn was much more jaded about things that were going on, and Lysander was getting a little put off by it. Because it was interesting. Sorry, Jess, you were going to say something about that.
Yeah, I was like, which is also something I wrote about in Lysander's journals. One day I'll release the Jess cut.
I have read that part of Lysander's journal, I think.
Yeah, the others have seen part of Lysander's journals.
Yeah, that was an interesting for me, because it wasn't a direct clash of values in the way of they didn't sit down and have a conversation about Lysander's sort of black and white view of society and morality versus Wynn's much more gray, but light gray. Like, they're a light gray view of morality. They will try to do the right thing, but they don't have that sort of view that goodness will be rewarded in the end. And so, just in the way that those characters interacted. And I have talked too much.
Well, everybody, that is the first part of our behind-the-scenes episode. As Hope mentioned, we take questions later and also get into a bit of a game. And so we'll be releasing some of that content over the next couple weeks while we wait for us to record our next session, which I know there's a lot of anticipation building for it. I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to get back and game with everybody and continue the story. Before we kind of wrap up officially, I want to take a moment to thank everybody for the huge amount of support that we've gotten for the show. I really appreciate a lot of the feedback that we've been getting from our listeners. A lot of folks are saying this is their favorite High Republic story, which is extremely flattering, and it is very, as somebody with imposter syndrome, very humbling to hear that kind of feedback. So thank you so much, everybody. I wish everybody could have an opportunity to play with an amazing group of people like I get to play. And I certainly hope everybody has that opportunity, because there's nothing better than playing a tabletop role playing game with a group of people who get along and can tell a really great, compelling story. And that's what makes a good game. Not the person running the game, but the people interacting and collaborating and telling a very creative story. So thank you all so much. Hope and several of the other folks on this episode mentioned that we have a Discord. If you go to our Twitter account at For Light and Dice, you'll see the link to our link tree there, and that link tree does have a link to our Discord, which is free for everybody to join. Please check it out. And last but certainly not least, the music that's used in this episode and all of our other episodes is composed by somebody named Grushkov, who has created a wealth of music inspired by Star Wars: The High Republic. Definitely go check them out. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube. You can purchase their music outright and support them. They are continuing to make more amazing music. Definitely go check that out. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and may the Force be with you.